Well, Debbie, thank you so much for coming and joining us. And just for the rest of you, Susie and I have known Elle and Debbie now for, I'm going to guess, about 10 years. I think it was about 10 years ago was the very first time that we met. I came out to California and we went to dinner together with you and Elle. As Larry said, Debbie and Elle have been on the full-time staff with Campus Crusade, and then a number of years ago left Campus Crusade's family as a staff member to begin Management Development Associates, a fund development and consulting firm, but have continued to remain in the Campus Crusade family as partners in the ministry. And I've got a series of questions, and I'd like to ask Debbie if you would just share with us a bit about your spiritual journey, including how you came to know Christ personally.
Thanks, Mike. I'm a Crusade baby. I grew up in a church in southern Idaho. It was not a Mormon church. When I was in high school, I came into contact with some students that were really on fire for the Lord, active in the Campus Crusade ministry at Idaho State University. I was so drawn to them. They were thrilled about their faith, and as soon as I could get into their training classes, I did as a freshman at Idaho State University. I didn't even tell them that I prayed that little prayer in the 4 laws on my way to a math class one morning, because they all thought I was a Christian anyway, but I prayed that to be sure. And so I guess I'm kind of the quintessential Crusade baby.
Share with us some of your experiences that have allowed you and Elle to be such generous givers to Campus Crusade.
I think probably because we raised our own support, it's been helpful to really understand both sides of the coin. You know, we understand how donors think, but we also understand what it's like to share your needs in the power of the Holy Spirit, leave the results up to God. And I think one of the things that probably is the most motivating to us is being able to meet needs that encourage other people.
That's great. That's great. Well, Debbie, tell me, how has your involvement with Campus Crusade, kind of with the Crusade family on the other side of the equation as a partner, how has that impacted your life? What kind of impact has that had personally?
When I think about the Crusade family at large and our perspective as ministry partners, that's where our heartbeat is, and we have the wonderful privilege of traveling a lot overseas. And when I travel, people always say, oh, well, what did you do? Well, my favorite thing to do is just to sit face to face and visit with our staff family all around the world.
Oh, that's neat. That's neat. Well, unpack just a little bit how that involvement has really helped you grow in your personal spiritual life.
I think as we've given more and had the opportunity to consider more opportunities to give, it's really been an issue of stewardship where we're saying almost every day, Lord, what do you want me to do with the resources you've entrusted to me, and where should I give? And so in many respects, I think God just really enlarged our capacity and our hearts to continually increase.
I know couples go through a process in thinking through how they're going to make financial investments in ministries. And I wonder if you'd unpack a little bit how you and Elle have worked through the decisions you've made in your involvement.
Some of it was trial and error. We've kind of learned through experience what not to do, as well as what works well for us. One of the things that I particularly appreciate is when someone comes to us with an ask, we really like to be asked, not just hinted at or hoped for. I also like to think about things before I make a decision. So I kind of appreciate being able to say, I'll get back to you in 5 days, or even have that person initiate kind of a closure time of, could I call you again in a week? I think a lot of us have kind of thresholds or ceilings that we're comfortable with, and sometimes our ceilings are not always the same. So it will take us some time to discuss and pray, and I like to be able to come back and revisit that. And if we can't determine that we're both on board, usually we won't go ahead.
Okay, so both being on the same page is an important thing for you, and it sounds like you really appreciate people just being direct in the presentation, that a clear ask, specific on what they're asking and when they're asking and when they'd like a decision, and that really is helpful.
Yes.
That's good. Well, I know I'm sure you get asked by, and you have relationships with a number of ministries. I'm sure you guys have plenty of opportunities to give to a lot of projects over the years, and even in any given month. What would you say are some of the determining factors that you look for in a project or ministry as you're considering a financial gift?
The first one is that somebody asks us. That's really important to Elle, particularly, because we're aware of lots of needs. And so we're waiting for the Lord to nudge somebody to approach us and kind of open that door. And that's the first step of saying, Lord, is this something you want us to consider? Often it's related to relationships of who we know that are working in particular ministries and endeavors, and sometimes we'll listen just because of our relationship and our respect for that person. Often it's if we can see a need that we can meet, even if it's not major money, that really can encourage someone's heart. That's the one that, our hearts leap up and say, oh yes, we want to do that.
Have there been times when you've been presented with opportunities that you've really clearly felt like, no, God doesn't want us to do that?
In some respects, it's harder for me to say no. I think Elle's better at it than I am. We're willing to listen and to evaluate it. But in some respects, we just trust our heart's desire that if God quickens our spirit to something, then we're willing to go ahead. And if we're not really interested, that's okay.
When you think about your involvement in ministries, do you have some things that you expect in return from that ministry?
Oh, yeah.
Would you unpack those a little bit for us?
The thing that I particularly really look for is I like some personal communication. Now, that's a little bit easier when you're relating as a staff person to a ministry partner than it is a project type thing. Obviously, we want some type of feedback on what fruit the money that we invested has borne. But I really, really enjoy and commit to praying. And so every day when I have opened my email, I have little Post-it notes that I write down, and I put those Post-it notes with my Bible and devotional materials, and I do pray for whatever's going on that people have asked me specifically to do. And so I don't mean 3 paragraphs of prayer requests, but I mean like Mary Peterson in France needs a resident visa card, or the Christian Embassy in New York City is having an ambassador's wife's tea, or things like that are specific, time-oriented, that I will pray for, and then I'll get back and ask, well, what happened? Or even better yet, they let me know before I asked.
Well, that's even better. So it sounds like that really having the relationship with the leader involved to the level that they would include you.
That's really important to us. And in fact, we have gone so far as to tell people when we've given an initial gift, please just send us 3 prayer requests a month. And if they don't do that, we don't fund again.
Really? Well, that's good to know. Is everyone writing that down? Okay. Can you think of a time when a ministry you've given to really has dropped the ball? I think it'd be instructive for all of us to hear a little more about maybe a bad example that you've had.
We had something really sad happen a couple of years ago. We were quite excited about helping a ministry relocate. This was in a third world situation, and we talked about their costs and the needs that they have, and we're very interested in helping them. And then we just didn't hear anything, and they didn't keep in touch, and they didn't send any prayer requests. And finally, we said, what's going on? And their answer was, well, we were just so busy. We didn't have time to get in touch with you. And you know what? We didn't want a big report that took somebody 2.5 weeks to put together. We would have been happy with a 5-sentence email. And so we didn't proceed with the funding. And it was a hard thing not to follow through and do, because we know that they needed the funding, and yet we really felt like we weren't partners if we weren't communicating and sharing in the process of of the prayer support as well as the financial.
Do you have any other thoughts, just as, you know, you've been a friend of the ministry, been on staff, been a partner in the ministry for a very long time. Do you have any other thoughts that you think would maybe help us do a better job? Any admonitions to do things differently? Any encouragements to keep going? Just really, it's like open mic Debbie time. Any thoughts for the team?
Mike, I think one of the things that I find the most helpful, I mentioned before, is being specific about why you're coming. We're waiting for God to show us where does He want us to give. So when you call and say, you know, I'm coming to your area, can I meet with you? I think that's God opening the door to say, at least pay attention and consider this. I like to have closure as far as when a decision is needed, but I like to have some time to process it too. I like people to ask me how I'd like to be involved. What kind of response do I want as far as reports or emails or phone calls or communication back? I don't want to go away from a meeting with somebody under the impression that they need to have a 7-page report for me quarterly, if that's not what I'm expecting.
Does anyone else have a question? During a presentation, have you ever been turned off by something that someone did or said as they were making the presentation?
The thing that turns me off is the lack of connection, especially if you're meeting with a couple. And guys, I think maybe that's a sexist thing to say, but you're probably more guilty of excluding the wife, because the decisions that we make are very much made together. And so I'm pretty much willing to overlook a lot of things if I have that personal relationship and connection with someone and feel like they understand my heart. When I get to know someone, I like to know a little bit more than what they're doing ministry. I like to know them, what their heartbeat is and their family situation and who they are, what motivates them. And so I don't mind people asking me what motivates you to give, you know, how can I keep in touch with you? How many grandchildren do you have? I'm always a little bit disappointed when we get a newsletter or prayer letter and there's not personal news, that it's, I hate to say, quote, just ministry news, but you know what I mean? It's kind of like the big overview of the general things we're doing, and I want specific things.
The observation was made that often it's easier for men just to connect with a man in their business, and which automatically or can automatically exclude the spouse. And do you have any suggestions, Debbie, for how to avoid that?
Sure. You're right, that's kind of difficult. We're pretty bottom line people and pretty straightforward, so I would just say, you know, do you feel like your wife is, you know, how much does she want to be in the loop, and how do you think we could include her?
Well, listen, Debbie, I wanted to just say again how much I personally appreciate your willingness to come and to share some of your thoughts with us.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity to spend this time with you. Thank you for what you do. You know, there's hundreds of people out there saying, God, where do you want me to give? And we're just looking for opportunities, and we need to hear what's available so we can make wise choices.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I have here with me Elle Ritter. Many of you know Elle because of your involvement in development over the years. Some of you may be new to Elle and Debbie. Elle and Debbie were on staff with Campus Crusade for a period of time back many moons ago, as Elle likes to say it. Elle, you guys have been involved since the late 60s, and having been on staff and then launching Management Development Associates. And I know from that you've got a real passion for development. How is it, or share with us a little bit your reason for choosing fund development as like a lifelong quest or calling?
Well, believe it or not, it was from raising support the first time. We came on staff in February of 1972, And there was something called Explo 72 that would happen that summer. And on February 25th at winter staff training, they told us that we were supposed to report to Dallas, Texas by March the 27th and have raised all our support by then. And to be flat out honest, I walked up to a guy by the name of Dean Anderson, and told him he was crazy. And then I went up to my room that night and got down on my knee, and I wrestled with the Lord. Just said, why? Because I tend to be bottom line oriented as well. If they want me there at March the 27th, I should be there. So we went out, and then finally at the end of that time, I said, Lord, it's all in your hands. And so we went out and we raised all our support in 2 weeks. And 80% of it was from people we had never talked to before. And for whatever reason, we were only one of two couples that arrived in Dallas on March the 27th. And I saw the Lord work that way.
As you think of just in your experience over the years, looking at major donors and their expectations of us, do you have any other thoughts that come to mind?
Well, the biggest expectation of us is that we will do with the people's funds what we say they will do. It's an issue of trust. And again, each major donor is unique unto themselves. There's some of our major donors I know that could care less for a report. There's others that, they expect a report, they want a report, but some things, we had given a gift to one areas of the international ministry, and all Debbie and I wanted was a one-page sheet showing how the money was spent. That's all we wanted. We just said, hey, how was the money spent? 6 weeks later, we got a 12-page report of how the money was spent. And then they really made us feel bad. They said it took over a man-month to put the report together and everything. Normally, it's telling a person how their money is spent. If you can't do it within a day or two, the people are starting to have questions and everything. The thing I hear most often is, one, it's taking me so long to get a report, if it's any kind of report, and two, when they do get it, it seems to be out of date. And most of the time, and as Debbie said, I find that small amounts of contact often are much more important than a large report once a year. Does that answer?
Yeah, that's really helpful. It reminds me of one of the people in our office, Scotty Moore. I asked Scotty to begin working with one particular major donor that every time I talked to the donor, it was him calling me asking why no one had given him any feedback. So I told Scotty, your single job is to make sure this guy never calls me again with that message. Well, Scotty has done such a great job of giving him feedback and giving him prayer requests and touching him every few weeks that the last time I talked to this gentleman, he was like, "Boy, you've got a really great guy in your office. He really gets communication." And so just to put a punctuation mark, Al, on your point, that is way more important than we might think sometimes. Well, so Al, are we doing anything right?
Well, there are several things. One, when I talk to the donors love to be involved with Campus Crusade staff. And so you being yourselves is probably the biggest thing in everything. Two is that they appreciate that we're still involved in trying to reach people for Christ. I must tell you though, and I hate to, is they're wondering if we're backing off on that, if we're not as serious about that as we once were. And if I may say, and this wasn't planned, but they really appreciate Mike Duggins. Mike gets along well. They appreciate when he calls or talks to him and everything as well. And this past 4-month period, and we did a campaign of telling people we were praying for them and we want to be with them and everything else. that was really the right thing to do. I can't tell you the number of people who said, you guys were so different than the other groups we work with, and all we got was stronger and stronger ask and everything, and you cared enough to want to pray for us and everything as well.
That's really good. Any other thoughts on what we might do to do a better job with our major donors as a ministry?
You know, there's broad strokes and there's, finer strokes. And a broad stroke is, I think they want to know where we're headed. They want to get in the battle, but where are you headed? Whether as a ministry, as a organization, where are we headed? Where are we going? When we present proposals, please make sure of your numbers. I'm dealing with one situation right now where a mega donor to the ministry gave a gift of, made a commitment of $1.2 million, and they were going to flow it at $100,000 a month. Well, it turned out the ministry head who wrote the proposal hadn't checked his numbers. And so what he's saying we'll do in the proposal, it turns out, after we went through it, you can't do for the dollars that they're talking about. It's not possible. This is the classic of what Dan was saying about preparation, in that they were pulling some numbers out of the air and not, assuming those were the right numbers, but not checking if those were the right numbers. And that can cause a problem. I think, too, is to listen to the wife as well. And for me, having Debbie along and everything, it is fascinating sometimes. I'll be chatting with the husband and she'll be chatting with the wife, and then we get together and compare notes. And boy, do we hear another side of the story as well. The wives really want to feel involved as well. And then the other kicker is that in a lot of cases, the wife may be the one that's really earned the money or made the money as well. One of the things I find is being very transparent with the donors and, again, asking them what they're thinking and what they're going through, how our time's going in right now. Normally my first clue when a donor is going through problems is when they don't return phone calls. That's my first, right away I know, hey, something going down. I think one of the most serious things that we have a problem with is we think if a person's wealthy, they're spiritually mature. That is not true. That's not true. I well remember, again, it's a gentleman that's passed on now, and we were talking, and he said, Al, I'm an elder in my evangelical free church at home and everything. I give them the most money, so I'm an elder. But I don't know if I know Christ. Don't forget that they're human, that they probably may not be spiritually mature in the Lord. They may not know how to spiritually breathe. They may not know how to be filled with the Spirit. They may not know how to love by faith. They may not know. And so besides fundraising, which is important, but like Dan said, most of the time when I'm with donors, fundraising's peripheral stuff. And one thing I found is that I think a lot of Crusade staff tend to have superficial relationships. And it's getting down in that real nitty-gritty level. And you can't have that with 60 people. I don't think you can. If that's not, you probably die from overload, your emotional system. But 5 or 6 people that you're pouring your heart into.
Well, that's really helpful, and I appreciate your vulnerability to share some of the stuff that has really touched you deeply. I think a lot of us struggle a little bit with the balance between developing deep and meaningful relationships with people and also asking. And could you speak to that a little bit? I think many of us, the pendulum swings one way or another. And help us, how do you think about those two issues and putting those together?
Well, and I may be being simplistic, and I'm talking about, on one level, people capable of giving $100,000 gifts or more. You may be thinking of just how do I get a $5,000 gift in the door and everything as well. So I'm not trying to look at that. Most of the time, you know, and I don't know how to describe it. After the first or second time I've been with a person, I've been trying to find out. My first thing is, how do they think? What do they think about giving and everything? How do they, what's their perspective on things? Why do they give the way they do? And you can hear many, many reasons for giving in that. But then, and as Dan was saying, do they have a heart for God? And then just seeing what their interests are and everything as well. And a lot of times I find that and I'm trying to find the low-hanging fruit that with not too much effort and just showing them we care and everything, that they'll join in the challenge, that they'll take on the challenge, they'll want to be involved. And that fundraising actually becomes a very peripheral issue. Knowing where a donor's head is at, where their mind is at, can guide you on what kind of proposals you give them in that. Because the worst thing it can be is if a donor has told you over and over again, here's what I want to be involved in that, and then you go to them with a completely off-the-wall other project in that, you start losing credit. You start losing your credibility. I can go through. There was a gentleman that was giving one organization $25,000 to $50,000 a year, and the rep went to visit them, and asked him, how do you make your decision? And to give, he just asked us. He said, well, I consult my soothsayer about this. And this was a Christian giving a Christian cause, and that's how he made his giving decision, was talking to a soothsayer. That's how he made his giving decision. Talked to another person and said, well, how do you make your giving decision? And you've heard the proverbial dart in the dartboard. That's how he did it.
A real dart.
He listed all the projects for and said, "Go on my guide here," and threw the dart at the board and saw how. I mean, those are the extreme. But until you know how they make that, or like we've been telling you, we pray about it. We want direct ask and everything. There's other people that they don't pray about it and everything. I'll tell you, if you get in with Youth with a Mission and see how their donors give and everything else, that's a whole different ballgame. And it is definitely being led of the Spirit and the big things and everything. But that has also caused tremendous problems within Youth with a Mission.
Well,
Yeah, I saw the little signs going up.
Well, Al, one other thought crosses my mind. With the proliferation of private foundations and donor-advised funds, and now that the economy is in the place that it is, it seems that donors really need a strong reason to give. Not
Amen.
Tax reasons, but a cause reason. Could you speak just a little bit to what you mean when you said earlier about a compelling cause, or answering the question, why should I give to you now? Just kind of talk about that a little bit for about 3 minutes.
Well, I think it gets down to the issue, if this doesn't happen with the next month or next 4 months or next 6 months, how will the kingdom be impacted? And again, you're talking to the donor about something they're interested in the first place. But, the Jesus film probably can be an easier one. Well, if these prints don't get done and they don't get out on the field, what will happen there? Or most of the donors look to us still for win, build, send. How are we going to win them in the faith? How will we build them up? How will we send them? We get a call from Here's Life Los Angeles. They need hams for Thanksgiving. That's a pretty urgent, compelling need to help. That's an urgent, compelling physical need that we, that we can be involved in. What's going to compel the people to say, I should take out my checkbook with my 401 down 40 to 50%. My house value has just fallen 40%. My I just lost my kids' college education. I'm, why do you need my money right now?
El, it sounds like the key issue is really challenging them in the thing they've already said they're committed to, and why their involvement in that cause with you right now is necessary today. And how they're giving now will make a difference, which will give them a much greater return today than if they held on to their money and gave it in a year. If we don't answer that, they'll hang on to it. And I appreciated so much what Dan shared about how he approached that one partner with, we really need this by the end of the year. And they were obviously convinced, and they jumped through some hoops in order to make that gift.
Yeah, and most donors want some timelines given to them. They want to know, how soon do you need it? How do you need the cash flow done? Everything else. We have, with ministries within Campus Crusade, I've gotten so now when I talk to the leadership, I tell them, please, these are our things. One, we want ongoing communication from you. Two, and nothing fancy, short emails, one phone call, 5 minutes, hey, that's. And then two is share your needs with us. We want to know what you need. With 3 groups that within Crusade that we've done with the leadership in that, within the past year, we have not gotten a proposal from any of the 3. Not a thing. And I think, and my problem is there's a difference between a development mindset and a fundraising mindset. And a fundraising mindset is, hey, I need the money. I got to figure out how I'm going to get it. And once I get it, I'm out of here. And this is a challenge I think that you in development can be faced with your leaders, is what we say, your leaders wants instant dollars, but that you need to do development right. And if your leader doesn't want development and they just want fundraising, then that's a whole different ballgame. That's the arm twisting deal. That's the, my boss knows your boss, and if you don't give the gift, my boss is going to talk to your boss and do that. I mean, that's a whole different ballgame.
Well, let's give Al a big hand. Thank you, Al, for